It is mythos, and if you've looked into this before, you would already know it's just a trick because there's been debunking videos on these things on YouTube for years now.
The flashlight thing is a sin. It doesn't work, and they know it doesn't work. It's staging, it's fakery, it's bollocks. There's your debunk. Go watch Kenny Biddle, go watch Mythos. They both do fantastic videos on why this flashlight trick is a load of bollocks and why they all use this specific maglite model.
One of these flashlights. Fuck. Hold on.
Can we have it so that it does the whole bleeping thing with the market? Like, you know?
Okay, we gotta start over. I could find something like that. But I kind of wanted to get to the subject. And that's our lights that I'm seeing. Okay. 1, 2.
I got peanut butter on my beard.
Just so they don't see any peanut butter. Okay. Hello everyone and welcome back to The Occult Life. There's been a lot of drama recently and bitching and whining from different groups saying that the debunkers are toxic. But I don't think they really are. So this is a fresh perspective from a very small channel that we are. We're a very tiny paranormal channel. At the moment, we've just started out. I mean, well, our channel's been up for about 2 years now, but we kind of just started out. We haven't really got a lot of things up. And so we've only gone to filmed at 5 different paranormal locations. We've been to 7. And during this period of time, we took out things that were only intriguing to us that we thought could have legitimacy to them, possibly. And that was the spirit box, the Ouija board. I've had my own experiences with when I was a teenager, and then the flashlights, because we thought that that was the most intriguing thing because it was a normal everyday household item. I mean, you know, it must be a trick or something with them doing it. So we bought the flashlights and we set them up at home, and they didn't go on and off at all. So we thought, okay, cool, we'll bring them out with us. So we brought them on the very first place that we went was Cheeseman Park. And the flashlights started turning on and off, which really freaked me out because I'm a full believer. And that was the first experience that we kind of had with that. It was before we knew anything about the flashlights, how people could trick with them or anything like that. Then we started bringing them to other locations, and we noticed that sometimes they would work, sometimes they wouldn't. We didn't really notice a pattern with it until I was editing Cheeseman Park recently, when I was like, well, it's in the cold. We had already seen the videos by that time, looking it up, like how people explained it. It's a heat cycle, and you have to heat up that reflector inside to kind of make the flashlight start that heat cycle of turning on and off randomly. You have to have the flashlight on for, 20 to 30 seconds before putting it to that kind of on-off sweet spot. So that explained why they never turned on and off while we were indoors at different locations.
You want to start us off? Or?
My name is Mariah. I'm just here to see if there's anything here that would like to communicate with us. This is Zach and Eli.
I'm a human.
we are trying to contact whatever is here and talk. So we come in peace. We're not trying to hurt you or anything. If there's anyone here, make one of those flashlights turn on. 2 flashlights right over there.
We tried communicating with the flashlights. That was boring, even to the spirits.
You're freaking killing me. You want to try the Ouija board real fast before we have to walk back? But we still had a lot of questions about, like, well, why are they turning on and off in the cold then? If it's supposed to be a heat cycle and the flashlight's cold, shouldn't it not turn on and off at all? You know? But I edited the video and I asked for people to come forward and tell us what exactly was going on. And then on top of that, I also sent a message to Kenny Biddle and Beardo. And Kenny Biddle got back to us almost immediately, actually. And he was nice enough to do a video conference with us, which is what you're going to be seeing right now. Beardo actually got back to us too. It was after Kenny did, and he said, yeah, Kenny's the one to go to for that. So from our perspective, they're all very nice people. I mean, I've been watching a lot of these channels for, you know, a good 2 years now. It was after we put up, like, almost all of our videos, minus Cheeseman Park, that we... What are you doing?
I don't know.
That we started watching all of these channels that were really interesting, finding a lot of like-minded people, engaging with the community. But, you know, we had a lot going on in our own lives, so we didn't really get to put a lot of videos out. And I finally, you know, edited Cheeseman Park and put it out. And, you know, they were... I keep on saying, you know. Anyway, here the video is for you all to enjoy. Watch our conversation with Kenny Biddle where he explains exactly what's going on in the cold, why the flashlights will still turn on and off randomly.
Okay. It automatically did that. Sorry.
That's okay.
All right. So we are recording. Let me make sure it doesn't blast you when we stop recording. All right. The Magalites with the incandescent bulb, they generate a lot of heat. Is that the one that you have?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we were thinking about getting a couple more and then putting the LED in and testing that out as well.
So you can buy the one with an LED in it and it still works. Because I didn't realize that until after I had a conversation with someone and they're like, I've been able to do it with an LED bulb, not the conversion kit, but how it comes from the factory. And I said, oh, all right, let me get some and try it. And sure enough, the first time I tried it, it worked. And I was like, holy shit. Okay. Because it still puts out a little bit of heat. It's not as I think, spectacular as the original one. But so the original one with the incandescent bulb puts out a lot of heat. And you need to manipulate the head. That's the first thing we have to understand here, is that you are actively manipulating the flashlight. It's not a condition of turn it on, turn it off. It's not a switch that just goes back and forth, click on, click off. It is, you have to manipulate it to get it in a certain spot. And that certain spot changes every single time. It's not accurate. It's not precise, because you're dealing with contact between two metal surfaces. So basically, when you twist that head, the spring at the bottom is only applying tension. That's not what we care about when it's heating up. You're not heating up the spring to make it expand more or contract less. what you're doing is the bulb is heating up the reflector in the front.
Yeah.
That's what's causing more pressure to be applied and going against the spring to shut it off. And when we're talking about contact, you're talking about micrometers. I mean, you're talking about so thin. You have to look at it through a microscope in order to see the difference and how it changes, how it expands and contracts when it makes contact. Each time it makes contact, the point of contact creates a valley or a hill on that surface. So it builds it up a little bit. So instead of having a flat surface, you have a little bump. And that'll change each time because you're making that very high, intense heat contact, especially at first contact. It vaporizes some of the material, but then creates a bump somewhere else. So every time you twist that the head of the flashlight, you're creating a different scenario where it makes contact. It's very slight, and you're not going to be able to measure it. I can't measure it. I don't have the equipment to measure something that small, but it's going to be different each time. And given the fact that we are the ones that manipulate the head, you're not going to get it exact every time. So even though you're going to do these experiments, you got to keep in mind that there is a variable that we know about, but we can't control. Because
that makes sense. Yeah.
You can't determine exactly how much, because I mean, I'm sure you've tried it when you've done it a little bit and you have to go back and forth to get it where it's just right. And that is different every single time. When it comes to the idea of it being out in the snow, in the cold, I watched the video. I did watch the part where you take it out of the backpack. So the backpack is on your back. It's probably not acclimated to the ambient temperature outside because you're still generating body heat, which is still going into that backpack. It's still keeping it at a certain temperature. So when you take it out, yeah, it's colder outside, but that's also working against you because as it gets colder, it's going to constrict the whole flashlight. All the components are going to contract because of the cold. And that means there's two things that are going on. And you touched on one during the video. One is that it contracts the entire flashlight. It's small. And again, we're not going to be able to measure it, but it's enough that it makes it a shorter distance that the contacts have to travel in order to contact each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fact, yeah.
Yeah. And then the second point is what you touched on during the video is that the colder weather, the body offers less resistance. So when you're not dealing with wires here, because usually we're talking about resistance and ohms with wiring. But in this case, with the flashlight, the wire per se, or the contact, is from the battery to the spring to the body of the flashlight itself. It travels up the body into a metal tab that goes into a black plastic piece where the bulb is pushed into. And when you unscrew the head, you're actually lifting or releasing some of the spring pressure, and that little black plastic piece with the metal tab comes up and contacts the top of the metal body, because the shaft, I don't have one here with me, but the shaft of the flashlight comes up and then it comes in like this.
Yeah.
So that black plastic piece has a tab. You'll be able to see it when you take the head off and you take the bulb out. You see that little tab that makes contact with the body, and it completes the circuit. So the cold is offering less resistance, so it's making it easier for power to flow. The hotter it gets, a little bit harder, but it's still going to make it easier. So not only do you have a shorter distance in order to make contact, but it's going to be easier. It's like it's pretty much like instead of going down a 1-lane highway with some traffic, you're going down a 4-lane highway with the same amount of traffic. It's much easier to get through. That's what least resistance means. So I didn't see anything in that video that deviated from what the science says would happen. I know you only handled it for a few seconds. You turned it on for a second or two. But again, you twisted it to get it into a spot. It took a little bit, but eventually it made contact. Between the cold making it shrink, it made contact. And once it made contact, the bulb heated up the lens reflector, which expanded to push against the spring and lose contact. Once you did that, once it turned on, it started the cycle. Because once it lost contact, it loses contact, the bulb goes out, and now it cools down. So as it cools down, spring tension takes over, it overpowers what's going on, and it makes contact again. Heats up, expands, loses contact, cools down, and makes contact again. So you got into that cycle. As soon as I watched the video, I was like, there's the cycle. It's right there. And I think, don't take this next part as confrontational, but I think you guys applied human characteristics to the blinking on and off.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good.
Well, at the time, like I had just seen people use them. I didn't look into like the background of it because it was so long ago.
Okay.
Like we just wanted to go out and test some stuff. So we did turn it on like to the same spot inside the house and just set them there, and nothing happened.
Right.
And we're like, okay, cool. And that's as far as the testing went before going out, and then that was the first place that we had ever been to. So, you know, when I found out about the flashlights and that it was a heat cycle, I was like, okay, wait a minute. So how does this apply? And then one of the things that I kept on bringing up was that it has less resistance in the cold, right? And I was like, well, maybe because it has less resistance, that's why it's turning on and off. But I wasn't quite sure. And then Zach's dad brought up like the ambient temperature of the backpack and how long it actually takes to drive to Denver and everything like that too. He's like, there's some differences in temperature that may be causing the flashlight to still react the same way.
Right. These are all conditions that most people don't think about. Like, yeah, the ambient temperature, how it was stored when you took it out into the environment, the testing environment, it didn't have time to acclimate before a test was done. So maybe if you would have left it out a little bit longer, you would have different results. But again, it still comes back to the changing variable of manipulating the head. It's not going to be the same spot every single time, and you're not going to get it into the same spot every single time. When you attempt to find that sweet spot, it might work once and then stop. It might work continuously over the cycle, which is what usually people want. And you may have to pick it up again because it doesn't work. Because I've done it many times, way too many times than I want to admit. I've done this trick, and it usually takes, I would say in most cases, it takes like me picking it up once, adjusting it after a little bit, and putting it down, and then it starts. But it depends on the ambient temperature, because I'm usually doing it inside, and it is a difference if I'm going to a location where they're playing with it and there's no heat, because then there's a little bit different cycle that happens. But once it gets into that cycle, it balances its own cycle, because now you get the heat and the cold, and the ambient temperature will change how fast it cools off. So you're going to have a gap in between. You're going to have, sometimes it's 15 seconds between it turning on and off. Actually, you're going to have a different gap between each time it turns on and each time it turns off. Because when it turns on, you're waiting on the ambient temperature and everything to cool down according to the ambient temperature. Heat is transferring to cold. So you have to wait for that. There's usually like a 1.5 degree per so many minutes that it does. I forget the actual formula. But once it heats up, that bulb is hot. I mean, it's if you ever touched it after it's been on for a while, it's freaking hot. So it's going to heat up pretty damn quick. And that's why it's usually off longer than it's on. If you look at some videos, you'll notice that it's on for a short time, but it's off longer than it is on. But then again, it also depends again. I'm sorry, I keep going back to like depends. It depends. It depends on the contact and how close together they are and how worn the contacts are, because you could have a faster cycle. Yeah. Any questions?
There's so many variables about
Right.
that. Yeah.
It really goes back to the idea that if this was something that was real, we have to look at the basic science here, is that if you were actually talking to a ghost and a ghost was manipulating that flashlight, that means it has to supply power. That's it. It has to be able to make that connection. And if that's the case, then a simple on-off button flashlight should also work. There is absolutely no reason why it should not work. Between a push button, any push button ones that has a push button on the end or on the side, doesn't matter. It should be the same concept. And that's something we have to consider too. I mean, it only works with a flashlight where you actively have to manipulate the head to get it to work. It's not a matter of turning it on and turning it off. I mean, honestly, if you just went there with the head fully seated, so it's off, and then it went on, I'd be impressed. If you turn it all the way on, like unscrew the head, make sure there's no leeway. You got a good half a rotation or full rotation where it's on, and then it goes off, I would check the batteries first. But then if it kept doing the blinking, I would be impressed. But that's not the case when we do the flashlight trick. It is actively manipulated in order to get that specific response. So even if you use two, like you did, you had the black and the blue one, right? It's going to be two different variables. It's not going to sync up. They're going to act because one, you start them at two different times, and two, there's still that idea of maybe one is a micrometer closer. The contacts are a micrometer closer than the other one. So now your gap is smaller and your time interval will be different. So you're not ever going to get them synced up. Something else to try that I noticed, because during that video clip, it did go, one of the flashlights went on even though you didn't ask a question. And you were like, oh, why did it go on for that? What there was a questioning from you guys, like why did it go on? And that's because, well, it's going to go off and on by itself no matter what. So I would actually get it set up to where you see it, you have it ready, make sure it's blinking, and don't do anything. Just sit there and watch it. And I've done that several times where I've had it like either during a live show or during a video where I'm talking about equipment, where I have the flashlight or two in the background and they're just blinking. They're doing the whole thing where they blink on and off throughout the show until the battery dies. And that's without trying to communicate with anything. But I mean, if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. Hopefully, did everything I say make sense?
For sure.
It did, yeah, and it really helps with trying to set up those experiments for everyone to see, like, exactly what's going on. Now, I know we don't have the equipment either to measure the micrometers, but we did see the Richard Reich video all the way to the end where he's showing the sparks, and he had something set up that was incredible. He probably has access to a lot of stuff though. But
yeah, that's the go-to video. I mean, I was blown away. I had an idea because I do have a automotive and aerospace background. So I worked in electronics, and I looked at that. I was like, oh, I don't have to do anything. This video is perfect. I'm done. Like, he did all the work. That's great.
And just reference back to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and just trying it, like, just because I've done videos. I don't know if I know I filmed it. I don't know if I released it, but I did the same thing where I had the temperature gun, the IR temperature gun, pointed directly at it, going into the lens, and then on the side. And it's amazing watching the temperature climb and then drop depending on when the light's on and off. And you can get a pattern. You can see a pattern and predict when it's going to lose contact or when it's going to contact based on the temperature from that readout. And it's beautiful. I mean, again, no questions, no trying to conjure any ghosts or demons or anything like that. It's just
watching.
It's just the science at work. And it's, to me, that's a beautiful thing. Like, I love that I could sit there and go, all right, it's going to turn on. Bing, there it goes. Wow. All right, it's going to go off. Bing. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, we do have a heat gun too, so we're getting closer. Just got to recreate some of the same environments, and then different ones as well. Like, I want to see, if humidity affects it, if all those different parameters, and then show people like the results of everything. Because I think it's important. A lot of people like us, they'll go out and they'll just, because you see a bunch of stuff on TV, and you didn't believe any of the stuff on TV to begin with, but for me personally, like, half of it, I was like, but that's interesting. I want to try that out,
Right.
So, and then you do, and then you get results, and then you come back and you're like, well, what was happening? And you look into it, and then you're like, oh, that's a bummer,
I mean, I used to feel that way. Honestly, I would be excited about something happening and then learn a little bit more. And it's like, oh shit, I wonder if that's the case, but I would never pursue it. And that was way back, like late 90s, early 2000s. I was still considered a ghost hunter then. But the more I got into it, the more I wanted to learn. And I switched, I don't know how you would call it, like appreciation for, instead of being upset and bothered and bummed out that I got an explanation, the explanation itself became the prize almost, because now I understand what's going on. Now I understand the intricacies of the science behind it, and that fascinated me to be able to look at this and go, oh, all right, I know exactly how that's doing. And again, going back to like predicting when it was going to go off and on, I thought that was amazing. It's like, all right, well, I'm not going to use this anymore, because then the realization hit that I'm using this, and anyone that knows anything about electronics is laughing at me. They are probably making jokes at my expense because I'm talking to a flashlight.
Yeah.
Exactly. So being on the other side of that, I mean, not mocking people, but being on the other side of that, where I understand what's going on now, it's so much more rewarding to me. And it's just nice. It makes me change my approach to everything else, because now, instead of going out, like, I know you said that you filmed that video, then you came back and start researching it. So next time you go out and start doing something like that, with not just with a flashlight or any other equipment, maybe you'll think now and say, oh, you know what? I'm sorry. That sounded bad. Not that you guys don't think.
We didn't.
Maybe next time you'll remember this and say, oh, all right, like, whatever piece of equipment we're using, let's try not to make it influence, and see if it still does it. Like, let's not try to ask questions or ask a ghost to turn it on or turn it off or do anything like that. Let's just sit here and see if it continues to do it. And then once you see that, I think that will, I don't know how to say it without sounding like I'm being a dick, but like, the light bulb will go on. That's what happens to me all the time. Like, I
Yeah.
sit here and I have a thought like, oh, I wonder what would happen if I did this instead. Oh, and then my light bulb gets a little brighter, and I'm like, oh shit, okay, all right, let me try this now. Let me manipulate this. That's why my investigations don't. I don't do like what you see on TV or on YouTube channels, and like go room to room, sitting in the dark, talking to, flashlights. I I I go there for a claim. Like if somebody says I used the flashlight in this specific room, okay, let's go in that room and do exactly what you did, except we're going to change some of the variables that we know we can change. If they have a REM pod, that's a really good example. If they have a REM pod and they say it only worked in this room, well,
Oh yeah.
now we're going to go into that room with a REM pod and see, like, does it actually go off? And if it does go off, let's see if we can trace the source of it. Like, why is it going off? And is it only going off in one part of the room? Like that leads you to believe, like, all right, something is in that part of the house that's affecting it. We just have to find it.
Yeah, some kind of radiant EMF or
Something like that. I mean,
power leak
it's
or something.
yeah. You can have. I mean, radio transmissions will affect REM pods because it's basically it's a capacitor. That's what it is. The junior thermin that's inside of it, it works like a capacitor, and you just need something that will ground it. And it doesn't have to be touching it. That's the thing. It just has to be close enough to ground it. Think of like almost like when you see like a Tesla coil, and it's got the electricity shooting out, and someone is usually in like a chain link suit, and they go up to it, and the electricity hits them, but it doesn't actually hit. It doesn't hurt them. It's just grounding it. That's what you kind of think of a REM pod doing, except without the fancy lightning show. It's power is not being shown. You're not seeing the power. It's building up inside the junior thermin itself, but you are acting like a conductor. So there's a lot. Well, that's a whole different topic. But is everything making sense?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
You feel better about what happened and all that. So, I mean, as long as you guys are satisfied and happy. I mean, if you have more questions, feel free to ask. I don't mind.
Sounds good. Yeah. I mean, definitely, if something comes up in the future, we'd probably ask again. Definitely going to do a video with a bunch of experiments showing people exactly. And then also, in the future, we wanted to test an actual theremin because, I was thinking, the basic principle, I knew right away that REM pods it's basically a theremin, a musical instrument.
Yeah.
And I said, well, why don't they just use a real theremin and go into a place with a ghost that's musical, and he should be able to play, or she should be able to play a piece of music.
Right.
Using the theremin. That
Yeah.
would be incredible.
It would be interesting. I've had my moderator for my TikTok lives. Her name's Julia. She lives in San Francisco. She's a video editing professional, but she owns one, and we've talked about that. And like it doesn't really go off much, but she does say, yeah, once in a while it does go off. And that depends on what her neighbors are doing. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So we did talk about some experiments, and her husband are going to try them out when they have time. So we'll see how that goes. But I agree. I mean, I want one. If I can get one cheap, like used, because they're kind of expensive. Yeah, but if I can get a hold of one, like a used one for cheap, then yeah, I'm going to get one too. And because I would love to play with that. That would annoy the shit out of my neighbors. All right. Any more questions?
Do you have any? You're good?
I'm pretty much satisfied.
All right. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. So.
Not a problem. I'm glad I could help. Yeah, in the future, if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. If I don't get back to you right away, don't take that as like I'm ignoring you. I'm just busy. I am so busy all the time. But yeah, all right. Well then, great. It was good talking to you. I will end this recording, and it should save it. So stay on. Let me just end it. Let's see. End.
So as you can see, it's more of a temperature cycle that the flashlights turn on and off with, not really a heat cycle, but a temperature cycle. That is a very strong theory. It makes a lot of sense to me, but we still want to go out and show people, you know, we want to do experiments with it and have conclusive evidence that when they'll turn on and off in the cold, maybe different experiments in the altitude, under different atmospheric conditions. What if humidity is a factor that might have a part in this as well? So we'll be taking them out over the next year and putting that video together. It'll probably take about a year to do. But anyway, if you're nice and you ask questions, the debunking community is very helpful. They're not toxic. They're not toxic at all.
And Mark.
Marker. Probably not going to cut this at all. Just
No?
going to leave it all in.
Why would you do that?
I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I think they're all very nice people. And here's some good information for you all, you know, with the flashlights and everything. If you have any questions, maybe I'll just cut it there.
Bleh.
Bleh. Bleh, bleh, bleh. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed. Cheeseman Park, if you haven't seen it yet, the full video will be linked down below and in a end card somewhere on the screen in a few seconds. Somewhere in this area. Probably right over my face. That's a good spot. Right there. And if you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe, and we will see you all another time.
Buy the merch.
Oh my god, you did it again. I thought you were going to forget that. Honestly.
I don't think that will ever be forgotten.
No?
Mm-mm.
We don't have any merch.